Imagine closing on your dream place in the Arizona desert, and, right after the keys hit your hand, you learn the city might not be able to guarantee your water. Not, rates might go up water. I mean, the kind of water problem where hookups get questioned, wells start failing, and the value of the home you just bought begins slipping faster than you can explain to anyone why. You're staring at sun-baked soil where a lawn used to be, and the Arizona dream starts to feel like a financial trap. This isn't clickbait. Thousands of homeowners across the state are getting pulled into the same reality. Agents sell sunshine, but the Colorado River keeps shrinking, groundwater keeps dropping, and officials are quietly putting limits on the kind of growth that used to feel unstoppable. When a housing market collides with environmental limits, it doesn't correct politely, it reprices. And in a place where water is more precious than anything, home prices eventually start reflecting that scarcity. Here's what most people think is happening. They assume this is just another market cycle. The same story as always. Mortgage rates went up, affordability got worse, demand cooled, so prices softened. That's part of it, but it doesn't explain what's showing up in the details. Cities where officials can't approve new homes because they can't certify water. Neighborhoods where utility bills climb because wells have to go deeper. And places where water risk is no longer a vague climate conversation, but a line item buyers and lenders are starting to price in. The uncomfortable truth is that some Arizona markets aren't cooling because people are picky. They're cooling because the basic assumption behind the purchase, that the home will remain livable and serviceable at a predictable cost, is getting shakier. In this guide to the 10 Arizona cities running out of water, I'm going to show you where wells are drying up and equity is starting to evaporate. Stay with me, because one of the fastest growing suburbs can't approve a single new home under current rules. And the number one spot is where residents have literally been trucking in water just to do basic life things like flush toilets. Let's start with number 10, Gilbert, because Gilbert is exactly the kind of place most people assume is insulated from this. It's polished, family oriented, and constantly shows up on those best places to live lists. On the surface, it looks like a safe bet. The problem is what you uncover once you look past the curb appeal and into the supply chain behind the water. Gilbert leans heavily on Colorado River allocations, and when shortage declarations become official, places built on that water get squeezed. As those reductions stack year after year, the strain doesn't show up as a single dramatic headline. It shows up as tighter conservation phases, higher replenishment costs, and a growing sense that the green parks and perfect landscaping are being held together by a system that's getting more expensive and less flexible. And you can see the housing market starting to twitch. Median pricing has struggled to regain prior peaks the way it normally would in a clean rebound, and pending sales have dipped in a way that feels like hesitation, not just seasonality. Homes are sitting longer too, with days on market stretching past what people got used to during the peak frenzy when listings disappeared in a weekend. The deeper issue is what happens when you try to sell the dream while the fine print gets louder. Stricter conservation, potential mandatory reductions, and long-term water costs that could climb sharply. Even if Gilbert remains attractive, the moment buyers start asking, how stable is this long term? The whole tone changes. When roughly a quarter of active listings are showing price reductions, that's not just noise. It's sellers meeting a buyer who started thinking differently. Now, number 9, Williams. And this one catches people off guard because it's north, it's cooler, and it feels like it should be safer. Williams shatters that assumption. It's a tourism-dependent town, the gateway to the Grand Canyon, and its water situation is precisely the kind of vulnerability that can quietly undermine an economy that runs on visitor volume and seasonal demand. Williams leans heavily on surface water and reservoirs, and those are brutally sensitive to prolonged drought. When rainfall drops, levels don't ease down, they fall quickly. During peak summer season, when tourism surges and demand spikes, The town has acknowledged it can barely meet existing needs, which makes it supporting more residential growth almost laughable. That starts to show up in housing momentum. Listings can tick up while the pool of buyers thins out, and that's the kind of imbalance that turns price appreciation into price stagnation, and stagnation into slippage. When you hear about plateauing, listing prices, and segments sliding by a mid single digit percentage range, it's not just a chart trend. It's the market sensing that the infrastructure cannot carry the optimism it's priced for. And once a city starts imposing temporary moratoriums or restrictions on permits because it can't guarantee hookups, you're no longer debating future risk. You're watching risk become policy. Imagine owning a short term rental and then hearing restrictions tighten: no outdoor irrigation, no refilling hot tubs, limited usage overall. That is not just a lifestyle inconvenience. That's a direct hit to the town's vacation appeal and a slow squeeze on revenue assumptions. Number 8, Casa Grande. And on paper, this looks like one of those still affordable, still growing places between Phoenix and Tucson where development feels inevitable. But the groundwater picture is where that confidence starts to crack. Casa Grande sits in the Pennell Active Management Area, and, overdrawn, is the polite version of what it is. This isn't a one-year drought problem. It's a long-term structural deficit, one that officials have put numbers on that are too big to shrug off. When groundwater shortfall projections stretch across decades, the key takeaway is simple. The gap doesn't close by itself. Someone eventually pays for it, either through restrictions, higher costs, or halted development. The housing data is already showing strain. You see foreclosure activity rising above national averages, and, more importantly, listings stacking up instead of vanishing overnight. Buyers are absorbing risk headlines and acting accordingly. When a big majority of homes start closing below asking, sellers are losing leverage. That matters because declining leverage is often the first stage of a broader repricing. New construction is where it gets even sharper. Planned communities postponed or canceled because they can't secure certificates of assured water supply. And once development stalls, appreciation doesn't just slow. The entire growth story loses fuel. Add in the utility side, rate increases tied to deeper wells, and infrastructure upgrades, and suddenly affordable looks less like a deal and more like a moving target. Number 7, El Mirage. And this is the kind of place that doesn't always get the spotlight, which is exactly why it can sneak up on people. It's a working class West Valley community that tends to blend into the background until you layer water risk on top of household budgets that don't have much slack. El Mirage leans on groundwater plus CAP supplies, both under pressure, but the twist is that availability isn't the only stressor. Usability is. When groundwater quality requires serious treatment because of contaminants, the costs don't vanish. They get passed through to residents. That's where water becomes a cost of living amplifier, not just a resource issue. Housing values have shown declines that may look modest in isolation, but in a community where incomes are already stretched, those declines translate directly into lost household wealth. Another factor that matters here is ownership composition. When you have large-scale investment groups holding meaningful inventory, their behavior becomes market moving. If they start trimming holdings, it can create supply waves that push prices down further. Active listings rising sharply over a couple years, longer days on market, and projected annual utility increases just to keep infrastructure running. None of that screams stable. It signals a place where costs are rising while value perception is softening, which is the exact combination that erodes equity quietly but consistently. Number 6. Goodyear, and Goodyear is a textbook example of what happens when a boom runs into a hard constraint. It exploded during the pandemic surge, distribution, master planned, neighborhoods, desert pushing outward, until the water math started pushing back. Studies on the local subbasin have highlighted overallocation concerns, And the practical meaning of that is brutal. There isn't enough projected water to support all the development that's been approved on paper. That isn't bureaucracy, that's a ceiling. You can see the ripple in the market.